So I actually announced Modular Mondays without looking at my diary, which is why I'm not actually in Scotland to be able to do my first Modular Monday, and I'm not even here because I'm actually here in Tokyo, Japan. But that's okay, because they kind of like modular synths here too. Okay, so I think it's only fair if we're going to start from the beginning. Full disclosure, my name's Christian. I'm a film and TV composer from Britain, and I also own a sample company called Spitfire Audio. I was born in 1971 in London, and I started playing the piano when I was 5. I started dabbling with electronic sound production with my BBC Model B. That would have been 1982, basically coding little algorithms that you copied out of magazines that you bought from newsagents. My first synth came along when I was 13, 14, which is unfortunately the point at which synths and synth music started getting a little bit shit. I couldn't afford a DX7. So my first synth was one of these. A Casio CZ1000 for my sins, because it wasn't a good synth at all. But I think one of the advantages in retrospect was it only had 16 presets, so you got very bored of the factory presets and therefore kind of had to learn how to program the thing. Come 1986-87, when I was around 16, along came something that would prove ruinous to my advancement as a half-decent synth programmer.
Drums, bass, guitar, horn, trumpet, you name it, even the human voice.
My first sampler, a Kurzweil K250 XP, bought with the spoils of an abortive child acting career, I kid you not. So from that year on, I would regard myself more as a samplist than a synthesist. However, in the intervening years, as my career as a film and TV composer took off, I was able to, very fortunately, amass quite a sizable collection of vintage synths. However, whenever I use these synths, there's this kind of little niggling feeling inside me that the knowledge I'm applying to their use is garnered from a Casio CZ1000. And to be honest, I just never really got my head around it. So I wanted to get back to the root, the origin, a box and a fucking power supply. I want to understand the fundamentals of synthesis fully. And where Modular is concerned, I'm hoping it's going to tempt me away from this machine. This mini vlog, this sub-vlog, is going to be about me learning from the get-go, learning from you, with you, and also discovering this interesting subculture of electronic music production and trying to ensure that this investment I'm making doesn't just become a bit of studio candy or a bit of divorceware, worse still. I've also enlisted the talents of the Spitfire legend that is Sandy Dobson. Now he's streets ahead of me in his knowledge of modular synths and is building a rig of his very own, so he's going to come to us later via the power of the internet. The extent of my knowledge of this tech is represented well by this empty table. I really do know naff all about modular synths, but I've been told the first thing you need to buy is the box, or the case as I think it is known, along with some electricity to power your modules. So this is one area I thought best to get some help with and didn't trust myself to DIY. Rubber Dub in Glasgow were able to let me have this monster 4-rack 104 HP, more of that in a moment, made by a one-man bespoke modular specialist who I suspect is local, as the model type is called the Lomond, after a big local body of water. The build quality on this thing is extraordinary, with it being made from the finest cherry wood. She really is a beaut. I decided on the Eurorack system, which requires these rack strips to provide me with a means of fastening my modules in place. Wikipedia had this to say about Eurorack.
Eurorack is a modular synthesizer format originally specified in 1996 by Dobson Music Electronic. It has since grown in popularity, and as of 2018 has become a dominant hardware modular synthesizer format. With over 5,000 modules available from more than 270 different manufacturers ranging from DIY kits and boutique, cottage industry designers to well-known, established synth mass manufacturers like Moog and Roland.
The next thing I got Rubber Dub to do was to build and spec the power, so I didn't run out of the stuff for my modules nor blew anything up. So I bought 4 modular power rows by 4MS. These power units, they tell me, will provide me more than enough current for each rack. I currently have 3 in and I'm expecting a 4th. These in turn are simply powered by basic AC adapters. Now these would be ample, but to keep things tidy I'm also waiting on some 4MS bus sticks. I don't really know what these are, but I've been told they'll be arriving next week, so catch the next episode. Okay, so this has already raised some queries and questions, so as promised.
Hi Christian, Sandy here, and as you know I'm getting in on this Eurorack craze as well. I'm going to be talking a little bit about my system that I'm building, my case and my power supply today. Those are the two things that you really need to think about first when you're designing a system, both how much space you want to have and how much expandability you want to have in your case, and then also the style and amount of power that you need in your power supply. So I'm building a slightly smaller system than you. I'm going to be DIYing this thing as much as I possibly can, and I've modelled the design of my case after a design by a really cool company here in the northeast of the US called Mono. It's a couple, Kelly Kane and Brian Crabtree, out in the Catskills. They have this really cool company that makes a load of really cool hardware, including a load of modules. And a few years ago, they designed a system in conjunction with Mannequins, who are another Eurorack manufacturer. They designed a system called ISMS. So the idea with that was it was 96 HP wide, HP being horizontal pitch, that's your space for modules. And it had 3U of space for your regular Eurorack modules, that's 3 rack units. And it also had 1U along the top, which was for all of your utility modules. I'm designing a system that's along a similar sort of form factor, but I'm going to try and give it a slightly more kind of hand-finished look to it. I built mine around a rail system by a company called Pulplogic. It looks a little bit like this. At the moment, it's not got a box just yet. So my idea is to have all of my DIY modules along the bottom, and then all of my utility modules and things like low-frequency oscillators and attenuators and outputs, maybe some inputs and CV splitters and stuff. I haven't quite decided yet. And then my main modules along the bottom are going to be built around the designs of Mutable Instruments, who make a load of really cool open-source modules. So you should check those guys out. I'll put some links in the video as well. So this is the rails. They're the 1U system at the top here. It's worth noting if you're thinking of doing something like this, there's 2 different standards for what we call Eurorack tiles. There's the Pulplogic system like this, which will take most of the sort of third-party modules and what they call Eurorack tiles, 1U tiles. IntelliGel also make a 1U system, but it basically only fits their modules, so look out for that. If you're building a 1U system, those 2 1U systems don't fit together, so you kind of have to pick a side and stick with it. So that's my rack, my rails, as it were, and then you can see my first module at the top here is my power, much like the the 4MS power things that you have in your case. The idea being that you plug your DC power in here, and then that runs to a sort of bus board, which buses the power out to all of your different modules. I imagine your system will probably have what's called a flying bus cable, which means you have like a ribbon connector that kind of daisy chains from one onto the next. I've decided to go for a slightly more fixed solution on my case. It's a system called Case Power by a company called Synthrotek. This was a DIY kit which I've soldered together myself and tested. It all works fine, thankfully, didn't blow up. The idea with this is this screws to the back of the case, and you've got these 16-pin sockets which are keyed, so you can't plug them in the wrong way. And then if you run out of sockets here, you can expand it. It's got a little Molex socket on here that will expand to more sockets as well. My reasoning behind getting this is the Case Power Blue. This thing is bananas powerful. I mean, it's just totally over the top for my case. But if I decide I want to expand in future, I can just run a little Molex cable from here to another sort of row of sockets, and I won't even be worried about hitting the headroom of this thing. I mean, this will run this system and probably another system of this sort without really reaching its limits. So that's my power supply, and the rails that I've got here are going to be mounting into a box that I'm going to be making completely from scratch as well. I won't be doing that single-handedly. I've got a friend, Brian, who has a wood shop who's helping me put together a box for it. But we're going to be building that thing completely from white oak, which we were digging around in the barn outside. My fiancée Caroline's dad and his dad were both keen woodworkers, have over the years have gathered all of these planks of weird and wonderful woods. So we have it's white oak. These planks are probably about 35 or 40 years old. They're a little bit bowed. We didn't use this one because it was just a bit too far gone, but we've managed to save enough to make a really cool box. I'm going to give it a really nice dark walnut stain. That's my case, as it were, for now. I've got my box is very nearly finished getting built. My rails are ready to go. My power supply works. So the next step for me is probably going to be an output module, and then start putting together these DIY modules. Back to you.
Thanks, Andy. My music tech friends here in Japan tell me that the modular synth scene hasn't quite hit craze status, but there's definitely a kind of growing, fizzing community. So Will and I are off to the mothership. This is insane. 5G music technology in Tokyo is quite simply the most awesome array of classic vintage synths for sale I've ever seen. But that's not why we're here. This is. I I've never seen a shop with this amount of modular stock in my life. However, I was here on what seems to be a whim to see if there was some local modular talent so I could come away with a couple of mystery modules with ineligible Japanese text to uncover with you and make my rack system unique with some rare international finds. But no such luck. It seems that the American and Europeans dominate here, so the usual suspects were all in evidence: Mutable Instruments, Dirtfer and the like. I did however see a module called the RT311 Swarm Oscillator, which does look interesting. If any of you have these, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I didn't buy because I can get it cheaper in Europe, and if I'm honest, the sales team in 5G didn't seem particularly eager to sell us anything anyway. So back to the shed for module victory number 1. I attached the AC adapters, plugged them into the wall, powered up, and yes, blue lights that suggest to me we have power. Thanks as always for watching. If you're not good with diaries and want to see the next Modular Monday when I'll be trying to make sense of all of this stuff unboxing, hit subscribe and the little bell button to get notifications. Please hit like if you like the video. It's always nice to know that I'm kind of doing the right thing. But the most important thing is comments below. If you have any ideas, suggestions, or indeed if you disagree with what Sandy and I have been suggesting, please contribute below. For now, arigato, sayonara.